So we're now streaming live on YouTube and on Zoom.
Thank you, and very much. I truly believe putting the word out there for young people is the way to go. And it just inspires me so deeply, the way you are doing it. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. I am thrilled about it. So when you asked me to participate in this program, and you asked me if there was anything I wanted to talk about, so much stuff went through my head, like so many themes that could be interesting to young people. For some reason, at the very beginning of my journey teaching principles, life took me to youth, and I did not feel prepared whatsoever. I did not feel comfortable at all. My children were tiny still. My eldest was, I think, 8. So there were not, topics that I had fresh, that I knew necessarily how to deal with, which proved to be amazingly good, because I was always out of my depth, always above my head, always needing necessarily to rely on wisdom in the moment, because I truly had no recipe for whatever was being brought to my table. And I have always felt very, very honored about that, about the fact that life somehow thought I could deliver the message to young people. Now, having said that, there were so many things I wanted to talk about that I found myself completely lost until the last conversation we had, where we somehow touched on this, how to set limits, how to say no, how to find that truth inside you that says, this is the point where it stops. I honestly think the earlier we learn how to do that in life, the better. We are taught to mistrust ourselves from a very, very early age. And what blows my mind is that it is learned, that it is taught. Like, we naturally know how to trust ourselves, how to trust our instinct, how to trust our inner voice and our inner wisdom. But somehow along the way, we are told that that is not the way to go, because other people's experience around us seems to have more value and more weight than that, because it comes from inexperience. And so I constantly find people my age talking to their little kids saying, I know what you don't know. I know what is best for you. I know. And somehow it is not even a matter of I am putting my wisdom before yours, or I'm imposing my wisdom on you. It has nothing to do with wisdom. It's I am imposing what I have learned on your wisdom. I am imposing what life has served me upon what it might, maybe, possibly be trying to bring to your plate. And I remember very clearly growing up all these examples of, how old age was the presence of wisdom, and it was not to be questioned. It was not to be fought against in any shape, way, or form ever. And that seems to wear away our trust in ourselves. Now I'm constantly abashed by just how much trouble there is out there, just because of this little tiny detail of us not being allowed to bring forward our truth and saying no to anything at any moment. I am always really surprised by how surprised people are when they make the connection between, oh, right, I have been telling my kids what they should be doing, what is good for them, what they should be choosing. And then being surprised by their kids falling onto peer pressure and giving in to whatever happens out there. There is such a story around authority. And that strips away our own power, our own wisdom, our own ability to stand in the center of ourselves and live from a place of wisdom and presence. Now, that inevitably takes young people into constantly being looking for not only advice but recipes, and how am I supposed to do this, and how am I supposed to act there, and how am I supposed to react in here. And the one thing that I seem to that seems to make a difference for them is when they understand that wisdom happens in real time and cannot come from a recipe. So in order to listen to wisdom, you need to be present in the moment, and you need to be able to be reading the moment so that wisdom can then come through you to respond to precisely that moment as it is being lived, as it is being experienced. So there is nothing, nobody could ever tell you about how to deal with a certain situation that will give you what presence will give you in the moment. What this openness to be absolutely present in the moment and get all the information you need from the moment itself, so that then wisdom can inform you to respond to exactly that. So when to say no, whenever you feel like no, trust that. Whenever it feels off, whenever, there is such a story around needing to make the decision now, about not having time, about decisions being forever. There is so much weight around all that. And we seem to forget that we have time and we can change our mind. And we can make a different decision 20 seconds later, or 2 minutes later, or 20 years later. And it is a completely new decision informed by what you have seen anew, by what you have been impacted with, by what you have been informed with. Now, the trickiest part is how. But again, how will be informed exactly in the perfect way it needs to happen. When I first came across the principles, one of my boys was being brutally bullied in school. He was still tiny, but he was being brutally bullied already. It was a bit passional even. It was not a bullying of I push you and I tell you that you cannot play and I insult you. No, it was it was way more, yeah, the only word I have is passionate. Like he would bring home his little lunch box, which was made of neoprene, and it would have, I don't know, 30 something scissor cuts in it or things like that. It was a little bit scary, honestly. And I realized that peace had been so important for me that I had raised my children to be pacifists, to live in peace, to bring peace forward as a main value in their lives. And as convinced as I was that you prepare people for peace, that's what will happen, it became very clear to me that me teaching them that as a value had deeply made them unprepared for life. And all their responses, all his responses, particularly to this specific situation, were incredibly beautiful and pacifist. And you know, I could have been proud. But at the same time, I could see how he was being affected and how he was not being able to deal with it because of this value that he had in front of him. And I had no idea how to deal with that myself. So I started looking for recipes everywhere, you know, and what could I tell him, and what advice could I give him? And everybody would have something to say about it, you know, from just break his nose to walk away to go talk to the teacher to anything. And we kept trying one thing and another and another and another, but nothing seemed to work. And then I saw it. I saw that nobody could have his answers for him. And the only thing he needed was the absolute certainty that he had what he needed to take care of that. And so the discourse changed completely. And from then on, it was, I have no idea how you're going to deal with it, but I know you will know when the moment comes. And I cannot tell you what to do because I'm not present, but you will be there. And as long as you keep a clear mind, your wisdom will inform you what needs to be done. Trust that. Trust that. And it was a very, very long time before he could trust it. But I remember the week it changed and how he started trusting himself in that process. And he came back one day and said, I have realized that I cannot always respond in the same way. Even when it is the same response, it has different intensities in different times. And so from then on, pretty much all my parenting has become, well, you know your answers, they are inside you. Just trust that. Trust that. And the feeling, the deep feeling of peace will be your barometer regarding what decisions you take. Now, that has made them not only courageous, but confident, which is very different. So courage is necessary in certain type of situations, but confidence is necessary in all of them. You can act courageous without being confident. But being confident, you can do anything, you can act anything. You can truly stand in the center of yourself and know what needs to be done. What is the next step? What the moment is asking of you. not only for your well-being, but for everyone's well-being. And that kind of expands the whole thing. It becomes, four-dimensional or fifth-dimensional, because it is not only, okay, what is the best thing I could do for myself right now? It is truly about what is the best option possible for all of us in terms of outcome in this. That confidence allows us to face things that we would not imagine. We would not imagine. And what has been incredibly touching to me personally has been to see my kids talking to other kids about this deeper knowing inside them, about this confidence that is possible throughout their lives, about this security to stand in themselves, regardless of the situation, regardless of their experience of a situation, and just wait for wisdom to talk to them, wait for wisdom to guide them. Allow that part of themselves take a starring role in their lives and just propel them through whatever can come their way. If we are confident enough and courageous enough to put our children's wisdom before ours, before our experience, respect it fully, they learn to respect it fully. They learn to put their wisdom before anyone else's. And that wisdom must help them set every boundary they need. Every single one in the most perfect way. So it really is just about knowing how we operate, knowing how that wisdom is ever present, knowing how to feel it, how to recognize it, how to let it inform us. I was a people pleaser all my life. All my life. But I did not know how to start trusting my wisdom until I did not have to find the way to teach my children how to trust theirs. I had no idea. Even as I was teaching them to listen to theirs, I would not listen to mine. It's horrible, but it's true. And then slowly you start to see, oh, right, I am doing exactly the same thing to myself. Now, I think a lot of the time when children or young people decide to take that stand in the center of themselves and say, okay, this is my truth. This is how I am right now. This is what the moment needs and asks of me. To the status quo, to the establishment, it can feel incredibly violent. It's often read as a rebellion, but it's not. It's just truth. It's wisdom at its simplest. And we need to start recognizing it as such. Now, Now, how about when they make really, really poor decisions, thinking they are listening to their wisdom? They learn. They learn. As long as we allow them to live the consequences of their decisions. As long as we allow them to own their decisions fully with all the consequences they bring. In that same spirit of absolute respect and understanding that this is their choice for themselves. I think it's really, really simple. Children learn to take decisions by making decisions, not by being told what to do. And if they are allowed to experience the whole story that comes from that decision, they learn really, really well and really, really fast. The problem is that we seem to want to save them from the consequences of their decisions. Now, the truth is, if we had the courage or wisdom to stop and actually think about the outcome in a child that is not allowed to live the consequences of his or her decisions, we would not want that for them. We would want them to see and learn and explore beyond their immediate wishes. Reflect, consider. They say that the Native Americans considered the effects of in 12 generations before making any decision for the tribe. So they would sit and they would reflect of what the consequences of their decision would be 12 generations down. That's taking time. That's taking time for wisdom to inform you. You will not do that unless you see it as necessary. Unless it seems like a good idea. It takes a lot of courage to live from the center of yourself. But it shows you that it's the only real way. And it shows you that it's the only real way for everybody else. And you end up in a space where you can fully, completely, truly respect what anyone else does, feels, thinks, says, because you understand they are being true to themselves. Full stop. There is nothing else but that. Somehow, knowing that you live in a world where your truth will be respected and allowed to fully be present is an invitation for you to see beyond your immediate want, to see what that is going to bring into your life, into the lives of others. And so it is not necessarily setting a limit that is rigid and straight and immovable. It's just learning to navigate circumstances guided by wisdom, guided by a deep inner knowing that you are being informed, that life's got your back, that there is no way you can get it wrong.
So that's just wonderful. If there's anyone who has any questions or any comments, then please either type into the chat box to ask the questions, or if you'd like to come on and actually speak, you can put your hand up. There's a little button that allows you to put your hand up, and we can actually allow you to come on and be on the video with us if you'd like to. In the meantime, while we're waiting to see if anyone has any questions, Marina, I'm just wondering, in a situation where a young person is listening to that truth and yet is amongst adults who it seems are not going to respect or listen to them, how do they manage to say, no, that's not me, and I'm not going to do that, or that's not what I want to do?
Well, again, fortunately, it seems to me, wisdom not only informs us on what, but on how to go about it. So there is no recipe. And how are you going to face your whole adult family with this or with that? But if you give yourself the time and the silence to wait for the answer, for the deep answer, it must come. It must come. And sometimes, I see kids every day out there that are willing to say no with tremendous consequences. And some of those consequences in some of the stories come with all their mighty force. And in some other cases, they bring a completely different outcome than the one that was expected. So in that sense, there is a path where we develop a deep trust in the whole process, a deep trust in life.
And before the trust is developed, what would you say about the fear? What would you say to young people who are still frightened? They may have heard what their truth is, but they're still frightened of actually saying what it is.
Yeah. Well, fear also informs us. It is a great companion in a lot of moments. But we must understand that fear is not always a sign to stop. Sometimes it becomes a good companion to actually come with us and do what needs to be done. Sometimes it's advice for time. Sometimes it's advice for reflecting a little bit longer on the hows or the whens. But it rarely is a call for immobility. We seem to believe it is. It's like the common belief out there. There's fear, stop. But not necessarily. Not necessarily. So if you are afraid, okay, sit down with your fear. Listen to what it has to say. Where is it coming from? Befriend your fear. See if it wants to come with you. Or if it's asking for someone else, for something else. Do not fear fear. It is also a friend. Every feeling that comes your way has information for you. All of them. You give yourself the time to sit with them and hear them through. Who knows what you will discover? So yeah, fear is there. Okay, why is it there? Why is it there for? I think fear most of the time is just an invitation to look deeper. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's not. I think people get confused about fear a lot. I know I did. I used to think fear meant, oh no, I mustn't do that. I used to confuse fear with guidance, with wisdom.
Right.
So that's partly why I was asking, because I know previously for me, if I had any uncomfortable feelings, I used to think that meant, oh, that's important. It means I shouldn't do this and I shouldn't do that. And now I realize it doesn't mean that at all. It just means I'm having an uncomfortable thought about this. Doesn't mean I shouldn't do it. It just means there's an uncomfortable thought about it. Okay. And I don't have to take notice of it. I'm not saying I want to push it away or get rid of it, but I don't have to take it seriously. That isn't my wisdom. That isn't my, the deep knowing. It's just a thought, perhaps.
Yeah. Hey, and sometimes wisdom brings fear. If you are in danger, thank God for fear, because that will tell you, get away. So it is not a negative. It is truly an invitation. I don't know. I have kids that say, I work with kids that are terrified to do something, and sometimes the simplest answer is, ask your fear to go with you. It's a good companion when you sometimes have to talk to a teacher or your parents about something. You're not alone. This fear thing is with you. So yeah, it's just thinking in the moment. But it's also an invitation to just look, at least to see if there is something valid behind it. Most of the time when we sit with fear, it disappears. It evaporates. It doesn't enjoy being looked at. Yeah. It's like scary in that sense.
That's absolutely right about if you're not frightened of the fear. That's the main thing. It's not being frightened of it. Yeah, that makes a big difference.
Sometimes we can even use fear. It brings an extra adrenaline, it brings an extra energy to the whole situation.
Yeah.
It is a very good propeller sometimes. Yeah, so yes, setting our limits and standing in the middle of ourselves and living from that truth can be terrifying. In a world like the one we're living today, it is certainly terrifying. But slowly, taking things lightly, allowing yourself to, sometimes the young people that I work with, they have had such terrifying lives that asking them to trust seems outrageous. It seems just even cruel to ask. And yet, as they begin to see very slowly how wisdom is always present, how it always has been, how it has never, ever left their side, they can start to relax little by little and allow for more space in their lives for that wisdom to come in. Because that's the thing. it will never let you down. Never. So even if it might be incredibly difficult,